Are you my daddy? The question landed like a blow to the chest. Not from a courtroom, not from a scandal, but from a 5-year-old girl, with a ribbon in her hair and no idea what her words had just broken open. Lorien Thorne had built walls taller than empires, walls made of steel, silence, and boardroom victories. But a child's voice, small, curious, unafraid, brought those walls down in seconds. He had always controlled the narrative, always owned the room. But in that moment, standing on a porch in a quiet town far from glass towers and tailored suits, he couldn't even remember how to breathe. The girl tilted her head. "My mommy sings sad songs when she thinks I'm asleep," she whispered. "She said your name once," but she was crying. His throat burned. The air shifted. Have you ever made a decision so permanent, so final, you convinced yourself it never happened? What if that choice had a name, a heartbeat, and eyes that looked just like yours? He had buried that part of his life long ago, buried her, buried them, until now. So if you're watching this, wherever you are, I want you to lean in, because this isn't just a story about a missing father. It's about a forgotten love, a quiet sacrifice, and the one phone call that changed everything. And if this moment stirred even a little something in your soul, I ask you to like this video, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Because what you're about to hear isn't fiction, it's real, it's raw, and it just might stay with you long after this ends. May peace, clarity, and healing find you today, right where you are. Amen. The call wasn't meant to happen. There was no signal, no working line, just an old rotary phone covered in dust, forgotten under a porch in a small town that rarely made the news. To anyone else, it was just junk. But to her, it looked like magic. Tessa Lorne spun the dial with tiny fingers and began to talk, pretending, the way children often do. She had no idea that on the other end, someone answered. Someone important. Someone she was never supposed to reach. Lorien froze when he heard her voice. He almost hung up, until she said, "Hi, mister. Do you know my mommy? Her name is Arla. Sometimes she cries in the attic. She said your name in her sleep." That's when everything he thought was behind him came roaring back. Names he hadn't dared to speak, memories he'd locked in silence, and guilt, unspoken but heavy, always there. He hadn't heard Arla's name in over 5 years. Not out loud, not in his own thoughts. He'd trained himself to forget. But no amount of control, success, or isolation could prepare him for the voice of a child, a voice that carried the weight of every choice he'd ever tried to outrun. "She says she used to love someone," Tessa continued, her voice soft, but he disappeared. And right then, Lorien Thorne, CEO, tech mogul, master strategist, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Regret. Sharp, immediate, real. So let me ask you, have you ever run from something so fast for so long you forgot it could catch up? Because sometimes the past doesn't knock. It speaks through the innocence of a child, and when it does, it demands your full attention. He stayed on the line, not because he knew what to say, but because he didn't. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't answering a call from a boardroom, an investor, or a journalist. He was answering a call from a little girl who had no idea she just pulled open a door he thought was locked forever. "My mommy says everyone leaves eventually, but I don't want her to be sad anymore." There are moments that shift a person's entire world. Not loudly, not violently, just quietly. A voice, a name, a memory. In the seconds after she spoke those words, Lorien wasn't the empire builder. He wasn't the man who led with numbers or strategy. He was just a man who had once loved someone and walked away without ever looking back. The silence on the line was long, so long that little Tessa asked, "Are you still there, mister?" And in the smallest voice, cracking under the weight of 1,000 unspoken things, he replied, "Yes, I'm still here." What followed wasn't a reunion. Not yet. That would come later. But in that moment, a wall cracked. Because even the strongest walls can't hold back the truth forever. And sometimes it takes the most unexpected voice to remind us of who we were and who we could have been. So, if your heart is still with me right now, if you believe in second chances, in healing, in the kind of love that bends but doesn't break, then stay. Don't go anywhere. Because the story you're about to hear isn't just about loss. It's about courage. It's about the power of showing up when it's hardest, when it's late, but not too late. This is Mr. Ross' story trail. Welcome home. Stillwater was the kind of place where mornings came gently and life moved without hurry. Porch swings creaked with the weight of old memories and neighbors still waved from across the street. On Wednesdays, the bakery opened early for cinnamon rolls, and by noon, the scent had already traveled down Main Street like a shared secret. People in Stillwater didn't expect surprises. That was the unspoken promise of the town. Quiet days, steady routines, nothing too loud or fast. Children played in leaf piles. Retired men gathered for coffee at the gas station diner. It was simple, predictable, safe, and maybe that's why what happened felt so impossible. Because in the middle of this quiet, ordinary Wednesday, something extraordinary stirred beneath an old porch on the edge of town. Tessa Lorne was 5 years old, a little girl with boundless energy and the kind of imagination that turned cardboard boxes into castles. Her curls bounced when she ran, and her voice carried through the neighborhood like a song everyone secretly enjoyed. She loved exploring. While most kids stuck to swing sets and sidewalk chalk, Tessa preferred corners, closets, and the spaces grown-ups forgot about. That day, she'd been playing hide-and-seek with her cousin, but grew bored when he couldn't find her. She wandered behind the house, toward the slanted porch her grandmother always told her to stay away from. But curiosity doesn't obey warnings. She ducked beneath the porch's edge, where cobwebs dusted the beams and forgotten leaves made crunchy carpets. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and that's when she saw it. A wooden chest, faded, with peeling corners and a latch rusted shut. It wasn't supposed to open, but it did. Inside, wrapped in an old quilt and bits of straw, sat a rotary phone. The kind you only see in museums or black and white movies. It was blue once, though the color had dulled to something softer. The cord hung limp, clearly severed at the base. It should have been nothing, just an old relic. But Tessa smiled like she'd found treasure. To her, it wasn't broken. It was special. Magical, even. A phone for secret calls. Imaginary friends. Maybe even fairies. She pulled it out carefully, cradling it like it might wake up if handled too roughly. Dust coated the dial, and her fingers left tiny trails as she wiped it clean. Then she spun the dial. Click, click, click. Her voice, light and cheerful. "Hello, this is Princess Tessa speaking. Who's there?" She giggled. No one answered, of course. She expected that, but she kept going. "I'm having tea under a porch. You can come if you want. My mommy says it's rude not to answer." Hello? Silence. And then, a click, a soft hum, a real connection. Tessa froze. A man's voice, low and confused, came through the receiver. "Who is this?" She blinked. The line was real. "Hi, mister," she chirped. "You sound serious. Are you having a sad day too?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that stretches. "Where are you calling from?" he asked, his voice sharper now. "From the porch at Grandma's house," she said cheerfully. "It's a secret place. I found your phone. Are you surprised?" Lorien Thorne stood in his penthouse study, staring at the phone in his hand like it had grown teeth. The call had come through on a private line no one had used in years, one reserved for a part of his life that no longer existed. He almost hung up, but the child's voice was clear, bright, familiar in a way he couldn't name. "Do you know my mommy?" she asked next. "Her name is Arla. She cries when no one sees. She talks about you, sometimes in her sleep." His chest tightened. "What did you say her name was?" he asked, quieter now. "Arla," she repeated. "You make her sad." He didn't speak. Couldn't. The silence made Tessa shift the phone between her hands. "Are you still there, mister?" she asked, softly this time. "What would you do if a ghost from your past spoke through your child? Comment below. I'm reading all your thoughts." He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. The name had struck something buried, a part of him so deeply sealed off. He thought it had died long ago. But here it was, spoken not by Arla, not by memory, but by a child who spoke with no hesitation, no fear. Just truth. He pulled the phone away from his ear and looked at it, like the device itself might explain what was happening. Arla, the name he'd locked behind silence. He remembered her hands, the way she wrote poetry in the margins of her notebooks, the scent of almond oil in her hair, the way she used to tuck her feet beneath his legs when she was cold, her laughter. He'd forced all of that into shadows, for years, until now. Is she your friend? Tessa asked sweetly. Mommy doesn't say much about you, but she keeps a photo. You look sad in it. Lorian's mouth went dry. Photo? He pressed his hand over his eyes, trying to steady himself. I knew her. A long time ago. She said you were gone, the girl replied, almost like she was thinking aloud. Gone before I was born. But maybe you were busy. Mommy says some people are just scared, even if they don't mean to be. That nearly broke him. Because it wasn't just innocence, it was forgiveness. Offered freely, undeserved. He sank into the leather chair behind his desk, a chair that had held him through billion-dollar negotiations and hostile takeovers. But it never felt heavier than it did now. What's your name? He asked her. Tessa, she said proudly. I'm 5.5. His throat tightened. That's a beautiful name. Mommy picked it, she replied. She said it meant something soft, like comfort. She says my name reminds her of calm. Lorian leaned forward, elbow on his knee, hand clasped over his mouth. He wanted to ask if Arla was okay, if she smiled, if she still liked green tea and long walks. But the words stuck. He had no right to ask. Not after all this time. Not after leaving without warning. Not after choosing ambition over love. He had told himself she was better off. Now, he wasn't so sure. Are you my daddy? Tessa asked suddenly, as if the thought had just occurred to her. His body stilled. The question echoed, not in the room, but somewhere deeper. He didn't speak. It's okay, she said after a pause. I think you are. Mommy never said, but I know things, even when people don't tell me. Lorian covered his eyes, pressed his fingers hard against his temples. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a mistake. This was his past, speaking with the voice of the future. Where are you? He asked gently. Stillwater, Grandma's house. We live here now. There's a big tree and lots of birds. Stillwater. The name rang like a bell in the back of his mind. Quiet town. One road in, one road out. No reason for anyone like him to go back, unless they left something behind. He remembered the way Arla spoke about it once, her hometown. How she hated and loved it all at once. How it smelled like cinnamon in the fall. She had taken their child home. She had carried the truth back to the one place he never thought to look. Does your mommy know you're using the phone? He asked. Nope, she said, a little mischievous. But it's not her phone. I found it under the porch. It's... He nodded slowly, though she couldn't see him. Special. That wasn't the word he would have used. But maybe it was the only one that fit. I think I have to go now, Tessa said. I hear Grandma calling. Okay, he replied softly. Will you call again? She asked. He hesitated, then said, maybe. Okay. Bye, mister. The line went dead. He sat there for a long time, the hum of the city far beneath him, muffled and meaningless. Stillwater, Tessa, Arla. 3 names, 1 truth, and he was no longer sure he could ignore any of it. The morning started like most others. Arla stood at the sink, sleeves rolled to her elbows, warm water running over chipped plates. The house was quiet except for the clinking of ceramic and the distant voice of Tessa humming to herself in the living room. Sunlight stretched across the floor in soft bands, highlighting the cracks in the linoleum. The clock on the stove blinked 7:04 a.m. She would need to leave in 30 minutes. She reached for a towel and dried her hands slowly, glancing toward the narrow hallway that led to the attic stairs. She hadn't gone up there since last week, not because she didn't want to, but because it was too easy to get lost in what waited above. By 8 a.m., she was behind the counter at the Dusty Page, Stillwater's only bookstore. It smelled like aged paper and cinnamon tea, a scent that clung to her sweaters and lingered in her hair. She liked it that way. Here, she didn't have to talk much. Locals came in quietly, browsed slowly, and bought more out of habit than need. She dusted the shelves, restocked poetry sections, and let her mind wander only as far as she could reel it back. At 2:30 she clocked out and changed her shoes in the back room, switching from soft-soled flats to the more durable sneakers she wore at the diner. Table 7 always left too many napkins. Table 9 liked lemon in their water but never drank it. The routine numbed her in all the ways she needed it to. She returned home just after sunset, carrying a plastic bag of leftover pie crust ends that the cook insisted Tessa would love. The porch light buzzed. The screen door stuck for a moment before giving way with a reluctant creak. Inside, Tessa had fallen asleep on the couch, one sock halfway off, a children's book across her chest. Arla knelt beside her and brushed a curl from her forehead. Her fingers paused there. The child stirred, but didn't wake. Later that evening, after Tessa was tucked into bed, Arla climbed the attic stairs. They moaned beneath her weight, not in protest, but memory. The attic was a strange place to find comfort. Cold in the winter, dusty in summer, but here, no one asked questions. No one interrupted. The clutter made room for thoughts she couldn't say aloud. She reached for the box in the far corner, the one with a worn ribbon wrapped around it. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she sat on the floor, back pressed to an old trunk, and let the silence settle around her. Then, softly, she began to hum. A lullaby, one she hadn't sung in years. Her voice barely carried, but it filled the space like warmth from a fire. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and it was safe. She didn't cry. Not tonight, but her eyes stung. Inside the box were things she told herself she no longer needed. A photo booth strip, 4 snapshots, 2 smiling, 1 blurred. 1 kiss, a necklace with a silver charm, Lieutenant, a letter folded in half, never sent. A receipt from a diner in New York, dated 5 weeks before he left. A bus ticket he never knew she bought, never used. She touched the edge of the necklace, tracing the initials like a habit. She hadn't worn it in years, not since that day on the train when the reality of his absence first took shape in her chest. She had asked nothing of him. No child support, no contact, not even closure, only space. Still, her soul whispered his name some nights, softly, not in longing, but in ache. A deep, private ache, the kind that doesn't demand to be healed, only respected. That morning, before she left for work, something had felt strange, not wrong, not dangerous, just a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. Like her heart was waiting for something. She looked at the attic door for a long moment before stepping out. She didn't know that hours later, Tessa would find an old phone beneath the porch. She didn't know that her daughter's small voice would carry her name across a line that shouldn't have worked. But she felt something, the kind of pull only a mother understands. The next morning, Tessa sat at the kitchen table, carefully tearing pieces of toast into tiny triangles. She wasn't talking as much as usual. Arla noticed. "Everything okay, love?" she asked, gently pouring juice into a plastic cup. Tessa nodded but didn't look up. Arla tilted her head. "You sure?" Another nod. Children have a way of carrying secrets, not with guilt, but with wonder. And sometimes a secret feels like a feather in their pocket, something only they understand. Arla didn't press. Instead, she reached across the table, smoothing the collar of Tessa's pajama shirt. Her fingers lingered. Something had changed. She just didn't know what. Later that afternoon, while folding laundry in the living room, she heard a faint clicking sound beneath the porch, like something being dragged or turned. She opened the front door and stepped out. The breeze was mild. Dry leaves gathered at the edges of the steps. Nothing. She leaned over the railing, looked down, but saw only shadows beneath the boards. "Tessa?" she called out. No answer. The clicking stopped. She narrowed her eyes, waiting for movement, but the yard was still. It was probably nothing. A squirrel maybe, or just the wood settling. Still, she kept the front door open a little longer that day. That night, after dinner, Tessa asked, "Mommy, did you ever know someone who left but wasn't mean?" Arla paused. She glanced at her daughter, who sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring a picture of a tree with long roots and a blue sky. "What do you mean?" Arla asked. Tessa didn't answer right away. She shrugged. "Just someone who left, but maybe didn't know how to stay." Arla's hand stilled on the dish towel she'd been folding. She sat down beside her daughter, heart suddenly uneasy. "Why are you asking that?" Tessa looked up, blinked. "I don't know. Just thinking." Arla searched her face. The same brown eyes, the same tilt of the head. Sometimes the truth lives in a child's silence more than their words. That night, Arla returned to the attic. She didn't bring a box this time. She brought her voice. She sat in the same corner, Tessa's blanket in her lap, and began to hum again. Only this time she sang words, a melody from long ago, One Lorian used to ask her to sing when the world felt too loud. The song wasn't for him anymore. It was for herself, for the parts of her that had learned how to keep going, how to smile when it hurt, how to love without apology. Her voice cracked near the final verse. She let it. Letting things break sometimes is the first step toward letting them mend. The following day, she came home from work to find Tessa sitting quietly on the porch steps, chin in her hands. "What you doing out here?" Arla asked, setting down her bag. Tessa shrugged. "Thinking." Arla sat beside her. "You've been thinking a lot lately." "Yeah. What about?" Another shrug. "Just wondering what makes people stop talking." Arla's breath caught in her chest. "That's a big thought." "Yeah," Tessa said again. She leaned into her mother's side, and Arla wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. They sat like that for a while, neither of them speaking, just the sound of wind shifting through the trees. Sometimes silence is louder than anything. Sometimes silence says, "I miss him," even if the name is never spoken. That night, after Tessa was asleep, Arla found herself holding the necklace again. "Lieutenant," the charm was cold against her palm. She hadn't worn it in 5 years, but somehow, it never made its way to the donation box. She always found a reason to keep it. She turned it over between her fingers, then slowly fastened it around her neck. It didn't mean she forgave him. It didn't mean anything was changing. But maybe, just maybe, it meant something was waking up. Something that never truly went away. A voice inside her that whispered, "He still lives in the child you hold." The skyline looked different when you no longer cared to admire it. Lorian Thorne stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city moved below like a well-oiled machine. Buses, people, blinking signs, but none of it stirred him. He had the view people fought for, the kind of space that cost more per month than most made in a year. But the air inside felt stale. He adjusted the cuff of his dress shirt, more out of habit than need. Perfection was expected, not preferred. Even here, alone, he remained composed. Across the room, his phone sat in its cradle, silent. Yet the memory of that call echoed louder than any noise. "My mommy's name is Arla. She cries sometimes in the attic. She said your name in her sleep." He hadn't heard that name in years. Not spoken, not thought. He had buried it somewhere deep, so deep it almost felt like another life. But that voice, the child's voice, unlocked something he'd locked away without a key. He hadn't slept well since. His home was immaculate. Furniture in clean lines, art chosen by consultants, a kitchen that looked unused because it was. He didn't cook. He didn't entertain. He didn't play music in the background or light candles just because. Efficiency replaced intimacy. Silence replaced warmth. And yet now, something stirred, something unwelcome, unfamiliar. He sat at the dining table, untouched coffee growing cold beside his laptop. Across the screen, numbers, projections, messages marked urgent. But all he saw was her name, Arla. He whispered it once, just to hear how it sounded out loud. It caught in his throat. His earliest memory was of a closed door and voices arguing behind it. He never saw their faces clearly. Not his mother's, not his father's. Just shadows and shapes, followed by silence. A woman's shoes walking away. A man's anger thrown into a wall. He had learned young that people don't stay. By the time he was 7, he'd lived in 3 different homes. He never brought much with him, just a small bag and the habit of not getting too comfortable. He didn't cry when he was left behind. He didn't ask when he was forgotten. He just became quieter. School was his escape. Books made more sense than people. Computers didn't lie. Algorithms responded to logic, not emotion. And eventually, he built something no one could take from him. By 35, he was a billionaire. People called him a genius, ruthless, visionary. They didn't call him kind, or warm, or gentle. He didn't mind, not until now, not until a child's voice cracked through the surface he had worked so hard to polish. He picked up his phone and dialed a private number. "Grant," he said when the line picked up, "I need a background run on someone." Quietly, the man on the other end had been his fixer for over a decade. No questions, just results. Name? Arla Lorne. She's someone from the past. There was a pause. Location? Possibly Stillwater. Stillwater? Grant repeated. That's way off your usual grid. Lorian's voice dropped. I don't care about location. I need everything. Employment, living situation, child records, if available. You think it's yours? Lorian's pause was enough of an answer. Grant didn't press. Give me 48 hours. That night, Lorian didn't eat dinner. He poured a glass of something dark and bitter, then walked to the far side of the penthouse where the air felt colder. There was a drawer he hadn't opened in years. He pulled it open slowly. Inside, a photo, worn at the edges. Her smile, hers, from a day when they'd gone walking in the park. She wore a scarf with tiny birds on it. He remembered buying it from a street vendor, even though she'd said she didn't need it. She wore it anyway. He never told her he noticed that. He never told her a lot of things. The next morning, he stood at the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. His suit was tailored. His shoes shined. His posture flawless. But something behind the eyes had changed. There was a softness creeping in. Not weakness, something else. Something he hadn't felt since he was 20. That was the year she entered his life. Arla, back when he was a nobody, with nothing to offer but dreams. They met in a computer lab on the lower floor of the university library. She was trying to finish a paper when her laptop froze. He didn't speak much then. He never did. But when he saw her tapping the keys in frustration, he leaned over and asked, "Want help?" She looked up, half smiling, and said, "I was hoping it would fix itself, but sure." He fixed it in 3 minutes. She bought him coffee the next day. And for the first time in a long time, someone didn't want anything from him, except his time. She didn't care about his grades, his tech ambitions, or his rough edges. She just listened. That's what haunted him now. The way she made space for him. The way she offered warmth, without conditions, and he repaid her by vanishing. The alert from Grant came 2 days later. A single email. No subject line. Just a file. Lorian downloaded it in silence. Arla Lorne. Current status, Stillwater. Population under 4,000. Waitress at a family diner. Part-time clerk at a bookstore. Lives in a rented 2-bedroom home with 1 child, Tessa Lorne, age 5. No partner on record. No court disputes. No request for assistance. No trace of contact. She never asked for anything. Not a cent. Not even an explanation. That detail landed heavier than the rest, because it confirmed what he already suspected. She wasn't waiting for him. She wasn't bitter. She had simply moved on. Quietly. Privately. And that made the ache sharper. He stood in his living room, holding the report, staring at a photo Grant had included. It wasn't high quality, just a candid, Arla holding a paper bag of groceries, her daughter skipping beside her. But there was something in her face, something he remembered and didn't expect to see again. Strength, stillness, a tired kind of grace. And Tessa. Tessa had her hair, but her eyes, they were his. That truth hit harder than anything else. He sat down at the piano in the far corner of the room. It hadn't been touched in years. A gift from a developer he barely remembered. He didn't play, not really, but he pressed a few keys anyway. Each note came hollow, offbeat. He had no idea what he was doing, just like now. That evening, he opened an old email account, one he hadn't used in years. A digital graveyard of unread messages, expired logins, and forgotten notifications. Buried between spam and student loan offers was a name he hadn't seen in a decade. From Arla Lorne, subject, just in case date, 6 years ago. He clicked. The message was brief. "I don't know if this is still your email, but if it is, I wanted you to know I'm okay. You don't owe me anything. I just hope you're okay too." No reply. No follow-up. She didn't try again. She said everything she needed to in one message, and he said nothing. Lorian closed his laptop and leaned back in the chair, rubbing his hands over his face. The walls of his penthouse suddenly felt smaller. All his success, all the accolades, the features in business magazines, the awards, the titles, the assets, none of it gave him what she gave him in silence. A child, a second chance he never knew existed, until a forgotten phone line lit up and a little girl asked, "Did you make my mommy sad, mister?" He looked at the report again. There was an address, a porch, a place, Stillwater. He had avoided that kind of place his entire life. Too quiet, too real, too full of people who remembered. But now it was the only place that mattered. The car came to a stop across the street from a white house with green shutters and a porch that sagged gently in the middle. Lorien didn't step out right away. He sat there, engine off, hands resting on the wheel. The air felt heavier than it should. Stillwater was calm, the kind of place where even the birds respected quiet. A small paper sunflower fluttered against the window of the house, taped with care, likely made by a child. His chest tightened. He hadn't expected the house to look like this. He didn't know what he had expected. Something colder, more guarded. But this looked like a home. One with laughter tucked between walls and routines that never made headlines. He checked the address again. It matched. He stepped out of the car. The porch steps creaked beneath his weight. 3 boards in, he paused, staring at the door. He remembered her saying she grew up here, though back then he barely listened. He was too focused on the future, on where he was going. Now all he wanted was to understand the past he left behind. His hand hovered over the doorbell. He pressed it once. Nothing. Then a second time. Footsteps approached. A shadow behind the frosted glass. And then the door opened. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. Arla stood in the doorway wearing a pale blue shirt, sleeves pushed to her elbows, a small dish towel in her hand. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands falling beside her cheek. Her eyes, they didn't widen, they didn't harden. They just stared, like she was trying to decide if he was real, or maybe hoping he wasn't. Lorien cleared his throat. But the words didn't come. Not yet. Arla's voice broke the silence, low and cautious. "What are you doing here?" He searched her face, every movement, every breath. But he couldn't read her, not the way he used to. "I needed to see you," he said. She didn't move. "After all this time?" she asked. A beat passed. "I didn't know how to find you, until—" He stopped. The call. She blinked once. A flicker. "Tessa," she whispered. He nodded. "I didn't know." Her hand tightened around the towel. "You didn't want to." That hit harder than anything else could have. "I made mistakes," he said, voice thin. "No." She cut him off gently. "You made a decision." That pause between them was long, heavy. "You didn't leave by accident, Lorien," she said. "You disappeared." He looked down. "I know." The screen door shifted in the breeze. He noticed her hand resting near the edge of the frame, steady, but only just. She studied him. "Why now?" He tried to answer. He really did. But the reasons felt like excuses now. "I heard her voice," he said quietly. "She said your name." That softened something in her. "Barely. Did she know who you were?" He shook his head. "I don't think so." And then a small voice came from behind her. "Mommy." A child's head peeked around Arla's side. Tessa stepped forward slowly, her small hand gripping the hem of her mother's shirt. Lorien's breath caught. It was one thing to hear her, another to see her. She had a slight lean in her posture, the same tilt he had in old school photos. Her eyes, too sharp for her age, watched him closely. She looked up at Arla, then back at him. "Is that the mister from the phone?" Arla didn't speak. Lorien's throat went dry. Tessa stepped closer. "Are you my daddy?" Lorien knelt without thinking. Not to beg, not to explain, just to be level with her, with the girl whose voice had pierced something he hadn't known was still alive inside him. He didn't know what to say. He didn't have answers that would make sense to a 5-year-old, or to her mother. But Tessa looked at him like she was waiting for something. Anything. So he spoke, softly. "I think I am." Her expression didn't change much. She just tilted her head, blinked twice, then looked up at Arla. "Is that true?" Arla's mouth parted slightly, but she didn't answer right away. Her silence said more than words could. Tessa looked back at him. "You don't look scary. I'm not trying to be. You sound the same." He smiled, faintly. "From the phone?" She nodded. "You were quiet, though." He nodded too. "I was surprised. Did you know about me?" "No." She thought for a second. Then, "I'm not mad." Those words nearly broke him. He hadn't earned them. Not from her. Not from Arla. But she gave them anyway, like children do, without strategy or defense. Just honesty. He looked up at Arla again. She hadn't moved, but her hand trembled slightly now. Not from fear, from holding too much. She looked down at Tessa. "Go inside." Tessa hesitated. "Please," Arla said again, softer. "Go play in your room." The child gave one last look at Lorien, then nodded and disappeared into the house. The screen door whispered shut behind her. They stood there again. Two people who had once shared everything, now separated by years of silence and 1,000 things they never said. "I'm not here to take anything," he said. "I swear to you." She didn't answer. "I just wanted to see her. To see you. And now you have," she replied. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was steady. She looked past him for a moment, to the car still parked across the street. Then back at him. "Do you think this is easy?" "No. Do you think I haven't imagined this moment? Wondered what I'd say if you ever showed up?" He stayed silent. She took a slow breath. "I raised her without bitterness, Lorien. I never made you the villain. I don't deserve that." "No, you don't." Another pause. "But she does." He nodded. "I'd like to try," he said. "If you'd let me." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not in hostility, but in caution. "That's not up to me," she said. "Not entirely. I know." She stepped back, her hand on the door now. He took a half step forward. "Arla." But she shook her head once. Final. Firm. "Not like this." The door creaked. She hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost a thought, she said, "You left like I was nothing. Now you come back like you're something." He swallowed hard. "I'm neither," he said. "Not anymore." Their eyes locked for one final second. Then she shut the door. Not with violence, not with anger. Just closed. And Lorien stood on the porch, alone again. Only this time, he knew exactly what he had lost. Before the titles, before the fortune, before silence settled between them like a curtain too heavy to lift, there was a boy and a girl, and it was winter in New York. Lorien was 21, halfway through his third transfer in 2 years. He kept to himself, spoke when necessary, walked like someone always waiting for the next setback. Arla was different. She moved like she belonged to the world, even when she didn't. They met on a Tuesday afternoon in the library basement. It was quiet, and the heat barely reached the lower floor. Her fingers hovered above her keyboard as her screen flickered. She sighed, frustrated, muttering something under her breath. Lorien sat across the room, headphones around his neck, pretending to work but mostly observing. He watched as she tried tapping the side of her laptop, unplugging and replugging the charger. Nothing worked. He stood, quietly. "Need help?" he asked, voice low but steady. She looked up, startled, then half smiled. "If you can get this thing to stop blinking and start acting alive again, you'll be my hero." He took that as permission. Within minutes he found the problem. A corrupted update, a lazy repair job from whoever had looked at it last. She watched him work, eyebrows lifted. "You some kind of tech whisperer?" He didn't look up, just good at noticing things people miss. She leaned back in her chair. "Well, I owe you coffee. That's non-negotiable." He gave the faintest smile. "Okay, that's how it began. Not with fireworks, not with declarations, just two people sharing a table at a corner cafe, passing warm drinks and stories like folded notes in a classroom. She talked about her hometown, Stillwater, the bookstore her parents once ran, her love for poetry and messy notebooks. He spoke less, but she didn't mind. She listened to the spaces between his words, understood what silence sometimes meant. They began walking together after class, not holding hands, just steps falling in rhythm. One night, the streetlights flickered as they passed under them, and Arla laughed. "Feels like something out of a movie," she said. He glanced at her. "You like that kind of thing?" She nodded. "Yeah, even if it's not real. Some stories are worth believing in." He looked away then, but he smiled. It was never dramatic. Their love didn't shout. It settled in slowly, like warmth in winter, building layer by layer until neither remembered what cold felt like. They studied at opposite ends of the same table, sharing headphones and quiet playlists. She left notes in his jacket pockets. He walked her home in the rain, holding his hoodie over her head and refusing to take shelter first. When he got the internship offer, everything paused. It was a major firm, one that fast-tracked talent. Out of thousands, they picked 5. He was one of them. The job came with conditions, relocation, long hours, high pressure. It also came with a non-disclosure clause and a temporary contract that discouraged personal attachments. They met in their usual spot the night he told her. Arla stirred her tea slowly. So, they chose you? He nodded. It starts in 3 weeks. That's fast. Yeah, a long pause. Is it what you want? He looked at her, and for a moment, he looked like the version of himself she knew best, uncertain but sincere. It's what I've worked for. She nodded, smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'm proud of you. He didn't ask her to wait. She didn't offer. They never said goodbye, not in those words. They just spent the last week moving around each other carefully, like dancers near the end of a song. Every moment precious, every word too heavy. The night before he left, they walked through the city. Arla carried a paper bag with 2 pastries, one of which he knew he wouldn't eat until later. He always saved the second one. Said it tasted better when she wasn't watching. They reached the park. He stopped. She turned toward him. For a second, they didn't speak. Then she said, "Don't disappear." He nodded. "I won't." She wanted to believe him, and he wanted to believe himself. They kissed beneath a broken streetlight, just like the first time. But this time, it felt like a question without an answer. Lorien left without a proper goodbye, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much, and he thought leaving quietly would hurt less. He packed at dawn, slipping the last of his things into a second-hand duffel. He didn't tell anyone he was going early. The bus left the station before the city had even begun to wake. He sat by the window the whole ride, watching buildings blur into fields, trying to keep his thoughts on the future. But her name kept returning, softly, like the end of a sentence he wasn't finished writing. 2 days earlier, Arla had given him a notebook. Simple. Brown cover. Blank pages. For your thoughts, she'd said. So, they don't get lost in everything else. He never wrote in it. But he kept it. The job was everything they promised. Demanding. Fast-paced. Competitive. Unforgiving. He moved through it like he was built for it. Long hours. Late nights. Always ahead. Always sharp. They loved him because he didn't slow down. Because he didn't get distracted. Because he didn't have attachments. And still, at the end of every workday, he opened his apartment door to silence. Perfect silence, not a thing out of place. Nothing left behind. He told himself that was the price. And he told himself he was fine with it. Until one night, 2 months in, he pulled out a box of takeout and saw her name scribbled across the top in pen. It wasn't hers. It was the delivery person's name. But it still hit him like a punch. Arla. He stood in his kitchen, leaning against the counter, food untouched. That night he didn't sleep. She waited. At first, not visibly, not by counting days on a calendar, but in the way she walked to the mailbox, a little slower, in how she glanced at the phone when it rang. She didn't call him. She didn't chase. But she left her porch light on for an extra week. Just in case. A month later, she knew. Not because he told her, but because silence becomes an answer when it's all you're given. She cried once. In the attic. Not loud, not messy, just enough. Then she folded the note she wrote him the day she found out, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it inside a box. She didn't mail it. There was no address. Back in the city, Lorien threw himself deeper into his work. Success came quickly. Promotions, a mentorship, high-level introductions. Every time someone asked what motivated him, he gave a different answer, but the real one never changed. It was always guilt, and the belief that if he just built something big enough, it would fill the space he left behind. He thought of her often, but in pieces, a laugh that came out of nowhere when he heard someone else say something she used to say, the way she always reached for a pen when nervous, the almond scent she wore, soft and comforting. These memories never asked permission to show up. They just did. He never spoke them aloud. And over time, they faded, but never completely. Because there are some people you don't stop loving. You just stop looking for them in the crowd. Tessa was born 5 months after he left. Arla gave birth alone, in a small-town hospital room with cracked ceiling tiles and a nurse who held her hand during the worst of it. She chose the name Tessa because it felt gentle. She didn't write father on the birth certificate. She didn't reach out. She just began again. For her daughter. And for herself. Years later, when Tessa asked where her father was, Arla answered without bitterness. He was someone I loved once, but he had his own path. Tessa had nodded. Did he love you back? Arla smiled. Yes, I believe he did. Lorien never saw her face again after he left. Not until that grainy photo Grant sent him years later. And by then, too much time had passed for words to fix anything. Or so he thought. But on the day of the call, when he heard that little voice chirp, "Hi, mister, do you know my mommy?" She cries sometimes in the attic. Everything he had built felt weightless. Every award, every title, every dollar, useless in the face of that sentence. He had always told himself he left for the right reasons. That walking away made sense. That love was a distraction he couldn't afford. But hearing Arla's name spoken by a child who didn't even know what she was saying, that unraveled every lie he'd carefully lived with. Because the truth was simple. He hadn't left because he didn't love her. He left because he did. And he didn't believe he was enough. He didn't knock again the next day. Or the day after. Lorien stayed in town, checking into a modest inn just outside the center of Stillwater. The place was quiet, unassuming. The kind of place no one would expect to find a man like him. He liked that. He walked the streets without his usual mask of purpose. No phone in his hand. No meetings. Just time, unfamiliar, unwelcome, but honest. From a distance he watched, not in secret, not like a man hiding, but with care. He stood across from the diner and saw Arla through the window, hair tied back, apron on, focused on refilling someone's coffee. She didn't look up. He walked by the bookstore around the corner and spotted her arranging titles in the display. A child's drawing sat taped to the counter. Tessa's, he guessed. Every time he saw her, something inside him pulled tighter. She looked the same. Not untouched by time, but real. She moved with quiet certainty, shoulders back, eyes aware, steps measured. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did, and chose not to react. He respected that. Tessa, however, noticed everything. The first time she saw him again was outside the bakery. She was walking with her grandmother, clutching a small bag of warm rolls. She spotted him standing beside a bench, watching the pigeons. Their eyes met. She didn't run to him, but she didn't look away either. She walked right up, stopped just a few steps in front of him and asked, "Do you eat bread?" He blinked. "Sometimes." She held out the bag. "I saved one." He crouched down slowly. "Thank you. It's warm," she said. "But don't tell Grandma. She says I'm not supposed to give food to strangers." He smiled. "Good rule. You're not a stranger, though." He looked at her. "No." She shook her head. "Not really." And then she walked away. That was how it began. No announcement, no dramatic turning point. Just a roll. And a shared moment on a quiet street. The next time he saw her, it was behind Arla's house. She was drawing on the sidewalk with colored chalk, humming to herself. He stayed a few feet back. "You like to draw?" She didn't look up. "I make the sky bigger than it is, because that's how it feels." He nodded. "Makes sense. You don't talk much," she added, glancing up now. "I used to, not anymore. Why? Maybe I forgot how." She thought about that, then handed him a piece of chalk. "You can remember now." Inside the house, Arla watched from the window. She didn't stop them, but she didn't join them either. Later that week, he tried to cook. He remembered that she used to laugh at his inability to make toast without burning it. So he bought bread, eggs, real butter. He borrowed a skillet from the inn's kitchen. Everything started fine, until the toast darkened, then blackened, and the fire alarm shrieked. He fanned it with a dish towel, muttering under his breath. Behind him, a voice. "Some things never change." He turned. Arla stood in the doorway. Her arms were crossed, but her mouth twitched at the corners. He held up the scorched toast. "You'd think by now I'd have learned." "You haven't." Her voice was calm. He shrugged. "I guess part of me didn't want to." A pause. Then, for the first time in years, she laughed. Not loud, not long, but real, and it shook something loose in both of them. If you've ever lost someone you never stopped loving, hit that like button, because second chances don't come easy. They sat on the back steps that evening. No music, no wine, no flickering candles, just the sound of wind brushing through dry leaves and the occasional hum of a car somewhere far off. Arla held a mug of tea. Lorien kept his hands clasped together, elbows on his knees. It had been a quiet dinner. Tessa had gone to bed without protest. Maybe she sensed something in the air, something unfinished between the two people sitting in the dim porch light. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Arla asked, "Why did you really leave?" She didn't look at him when she said it. She stared straight ahead, into the dark yard. Lorien let the question sit, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it more real. "I was afraid." She turned her head slightly, but didn't interrupt. "I told myself I left to build something, to give myself a future. But that wasn't the truth." He took a slow breath. "I left because you saw me, and I didn't know how to live with that." She looked at him now. "You think that's a reason?" "No," he said. "It's an explanation, one you deserve, even if it doesn't fix anything." Another pause. Then she said, softly, "You could have just told me. I thought if I stayed, I'd ruin you, that I'd never be enough. And if you left, I wouldn't break." That silenced him. Completely. She sipped her tea, then placed it gently on the step beside her. "You didn't give me the truth, Lorien. You gave me silence, and I had to carry it like a body that didn't belong to me." He lowered his gaze. "I know." A long moment passed. "I don't hate you," she said, "but I learned how to live without you, for me and for her. I don't want to undo that," he said. "I don't want to take her away or rewrite anything." She studied him carefully. "Then what do you want?" He looked up, his eyes steady. "I want to know her. And me. I want to earn the right to speak to you again, without shame." Her face didn't soften, but something shifted. Just a little. "That takes time," she said. "I'll wait. And if I don't forgive you?" He nodded. "Then I'll still stay." The next morning, he waited outside the schoolyard, leaning on the fence. Tessa came out with her backpack bouncing, lunchbox swinging wildly from one hand. She spotted him. Walked over. "You came again. Told you I would." She grinned. "Do you know how to play checkers?" "I can learn." "Good. I always win." He smiled. "Maybe today I'll let you." She shook her head. "Don't. I like it better when people try." Arla watched from her car across the street. No emotion on her face, just quiet observation. She didn't get out right away, but she didn't drive off either. Not yet. The attic had always belonged to Arla. It was where she stored what couldn't be explained, what couldn't be thrown away. It held dust and grief and the kind of love that never found its finish line. Tessa wasn't usually allowed up there alone, but this time she had company. Lorien stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. She waited at the top, holding a flashlight with both hands. "It's okay," she whispered. "It doesn't bite." He gave a soft breath, close to a laugh, and followed. The steps creaked under his weight, and the air grew cooler with each climb. The attic was quiet, filled with shadows and boxes labeled in faded ink. Tessa pointed to the far corner. "That one," she said. "It has your letters." He looked at her. "My letters?" She nodded. "The ones Mommy kept. I found them once. She said they were from a long time ago, before I was here." Lorien crossed the room slowly. The floorboards flexed under his steps. The box was there, taped once, then resealed with ribbon. He hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside were pieces of another life. Old ticket stubs, a scarf, a dried flower pressed between notebook pages, a postcard from a trip they never took but always talked about, and a stack of letters. His handwriting. He touched the top one. The date read like a different era. Tessa sat on a folded blanket nearby, hugging her knees to her chest. "She doesn't read them anymore," she said. But she didn't throw them away. That line caught him off guard. It wasn't just a comment. It was a confession. He read in silence. One letter, then another. His words, once written with purpose, now felt like echoes. Hopeful, naive, unaware of what they would leave behind. Halfway through the box, he saw it. A small envelope, cream-colored, slightly wrinkled. It had no stamp, only his name on the front. Lorien. He opened it with care. Inside was a single photograph. Grainy, black and white, an ultrasound. Next to it, a handwritten note, brief but complete. If you ever wonder what love looks like, you'll see it in her eyes. His breath stopped. Tessa had gone quiet now, still, watching him from across the room. He set the photo on his knee, staring at it. And then, for the first time in years, he cried. Not the single tear kind, not the subtle stoic type, but full, shoulders curled, chest tightening. Grief that had waited too long to speak. Years of ambition, of distance, of trying not to feel. They broke at once. He covered his face with both hands, shaking with every breath. Tessa stayed where she was. She didn't move closer, but she didn't look away. She let him fall apart in peace. Behind them, the attic door creaked open. Arla stood at the top of the stairs, one hand resting on the frame. She hadn't planned to follow, but something inside her told her to come. She didn't speak, not right away, just watched as the man who once walked away now sat on her attic floor, surrounded by the pieces of everything he left behind. Her gaze softened, but her posture stayed still. Tessa turned to her. He found the letter. Arla nodded once. Lorien lifted his head. Eyes red, voice broken. You wrote this when you found out? She stepped into the room slowly. I didn't know where to send it. He swallowed hard. You saved everything. I tried not to. Her voice was gentle, wounded, but not bitter. I told myself I'd burn it all. I even brought the box outside once, matches in hand. He looked up at her. Why didn't you? She exhaled. Because part of me hoped you'd come back. Even when I hated myself for it. The attic was silent again. Only this time, it didn't feel cold. Arla moved closer. She didn't sit. She didn't reach for the letter or the photo. She just stood beside them, near enough to be present, far enough to keep her boundary intact. Lorien wiped his face with his sleeve, not to hide the tears but to catch his breath. I thought I had time, he said quietly. She didn't respond. I thought I could go build something, make sense of myself, then come back, or reach out when I was better. Her expression didn't change. You left before there was anything to fix, she said. He nodded. I did. She looked at Tessa, who had begun tracing lines on the attic floor with her finger, completely at peace in a room filled with the pieces of her story. She never asked much about you, Arla added. Not until recently. She just understood that something was missing. But she didn't fill it with anger. Lorien's eyes lingered on his daughter. She's incredible. She's mine, Arla said softly. And now, maybe she's yours too, but that won't be decided today. He accepted that. He had no right to ask for more. Tessa looked up, eyes curious. Was that me? She asked, pointing to the photo in his hand. He nodded. Before you were born. That's the first time your mommy saw you. Did you see me too? He took a long breath. No, not then. She looked at him closely. But you wanted to. His throat tightened. More than anything. She tilted her head. Then I think it's okay. That one sentence gave him more grace than he felt he deserved. Arla finally sat down across from him. Her legs crossed, back straight. She didn't hold the letters. She didn't look through the box. She looked at him. Do you understand now? I think I always did, he said. But I ran anyway. Because you were scared? Because I was selfish. She let that hang. She didn't comfort him. She didn't argue. Just silence again. And then she said, you have to show up now, not with money, not with promises, but with presence. He nodded. I can do that. If you can't, she added, don't open this door for her again. Don't start something you're not willing to keep. I hear you, he said. No, I need you to feel it. He looked her in the eye. I do. They sat like that for a while. No need to fill the air. Tessa laid on her stomach, humming softly, scribbling in a notebook she found in an open box. The attic, once filled with shadows, now felt warmer, not because the grief was gone, but because someone else was finally willing to carry it. That night, as Lorien stepped off the porch to head back to the inn, Tessa called after him from the doorway. Next time, can we come back up and look through more boxes? He turned and smiled. If your mom says yes, I'd like that. Arla stood behind her, arms crossed loosely. She didn't answer out loud, but she didn't say no either. And in a town where nothing rushed, that was enough. The city didn't feel the same. Lorian stepped out of the black car and stood at the curb in front of Thorntech's corporate headquarters. Glass stretched above him. The logo glinted under the morning sun. Suits passed by without eye contact. Everyone moved fast. But Lorian didn't. He stood still, watching the building like he was seeing it for the first time. And maybe, in a way, he was. The doors slid open. He stepped inside. Everything was polished, efficient, cold. He walked past the front desk where his name was etched into the marble wall behind the receptionist. A statement, once, a symbol of permanence. Now, it felt hollow. Inside the executive elevator, his reflection stared back at him. Tailored suit, crisp shirt, hair neatly combed, every button in place. But his eyes gave him away. He wasn't the same. His assistant, Jamie, met him outside the boardroom, holding a folder with updated notes for the quarterly meeting. She blinked as she handed it to him. "You look rested," she said, almost surprised. Lorian glanced at her. "Is that unusual?" She gave a small smile. "Let's just say it's not your usual Monday energy." He nodded once, flipping through the folder without reading it. "What's the mood in the room?" "Tense. They're expecting some kind of announcement." "Good," he said. "They're about to get one." Inside, the boardroom was exactly as he'd left it. Sleek, intimidating, designed to impress. 12 men and women sat around the table, every one of them used to power plays and performance metrics. They looked up as he entered. He didn't sit immediately. He placed the folder on the table, left it closed. "Before we get into numbers," he said, "there's something I need to say." The air shifted. Subtle. But it did. No one interrupted. He took a breath. "I've spent most of my life building this company. Every piece of it came at a cost." He looked around the room, meeting eyes. "And for years I told myself it was worth it, that growing this empire justified everything I lost along the way." His voice stayed calm, clear. But I was wrong. Murmurs moved like a slow ripple. His CFO shifted in his seat. The head of strategy looked confused. Lorian continued, "I left behind something far more important than a product, than a valuation, than market share." Another pause. "I left someone I loved, and a daughter I never knew existed." That silenced the room. Completely. Even Jamie, standing near the door, froze. "I've met her. She's 5. Her name is Tessa, and I wouldn't trade $1 billion for 5 minutes with her." He finally sat down, hands folded in front of him. "This company is solid. The team is strong. The vision remains. But I've found something greater than profit. And I won't pretend otherwise just to keep a narrative going." The silence held. Then slowly, the head of communications spoke. "Are you making this public?" Lorian nodded once. Today, the press conference had already been scheduled. It was meant to address quarterly growth and next phase expansion. Everyone expected another ambitious rollout, another perfectly crafted statement. But Lorian stood at the podium and discarded the script. "Before we begin," he said, eyes steady beneath the camera lights, "I'd like to speak as a man, not a brand." He paused. No teleprompter, no notes, just truth. "For years, I chased something I thought would make me whole. I built this company from the ground up because I believed success would give me meaning. But recently, I learned that meaning doesn't come from achievement, it comes from connection. I have a daughter, and I left someone I loved without saying goodbye. I've spent a decade building a legacy I could be proud of, but none of that means anything if I don't show up where it matters most." He looked directly into the cameras. "So today, I want to say this, publicly, clearly, and without hesitation. I am a father. I was once in love, and now I'm doing the work to rebuild something more valuable than any company. What's more powerful, love or legacy? Comment below and share this if someone you know needs this story today." The press room went still. No one clapped. No one spoke, not right away. And that was the loudest moment of all. Because the man behind the microphone wasn't delivering another market projection. He wasn't unveiling a product. He was telling the truth. Raw, personal, unexpected. Within minutes of leaving the podium, it was everywhere. The clip hit social feeds before the microphones were even unplugged. CEO confesses to secret family Thorntech titan, reveals hidden daughter and emotional. Statement billionaire walks off script and into the hearts of millions. Speculation swirled. Names trended. Analysts scrambled to assess impact. But Lorian didn't check the headlines. He was already back in his office, looking out the window at the street below. For the first time in his career, he didn't feel bigger than the building. He felt human. Jamie entered quietly, holding a tablet. "The board's still stunned," she said. He nodded. "They'll get over it. Some already are. A few said it was the first time they saw you as a person." He almost smiled. "Funny how it takes breaking something to feel whole." She hesitated, then added, "Your stock dropped." Briefly, he turned. "And it's recovering, fast. That's not what I care about." "I know." She set the tablet on his desk and stepped back. "I think you did the right thing," she said. He didn't reply, but his silence this time felt different. Not avoidance. Peace. That evening, as he walked out of the building alone, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number, but he knew who it was from the moment he saw the words. "She saw your speech, asked me if people cry when they're proud. I told her yes. And yes, we did." He stared at the screen for a long time, then replied with one sentence, "Tell her I'm on my way back." In Stillwater, Arla stood at the kitchen counter, folding laundry. The TV was off. The house was quiet. Tessa sat at the table with colored pencils, drawing a picture of a microphone with little hearts around it. "Mommy, can people say things in front of the world and still mean them?" Arla turned. "Yes, baby. Especially when they mean them most." 2 days later, the media still talked, but Lorien didn't care. His team offered to control the narrative, to shape the story. He refused. "Let it be messy," he said. "Let it be real." At a staff meeting later that week, he entered without a suit jacket. No tie, just a simple gray shirt and the same calm expression he carried the day he confessed. He didn't talk about metrics. He talked about mentorship, boundaries, balance. He ended the meeting with a single reminder. Success without presence is just a louder version of absence. Later that afternoon, alone in his office, he placed a small frame on his desk. A copy of the photo Arla had sent him. The first glimpse of Tessa, small, blurry, alive. Beside it, he placed something else, the note she'd written. "If you ever wonder what love looks like." His hand brushed over the glass. He didn't need to read the rest. He already knew. The bus from the city pulled in just after noon. No press, no cameras, no entourage, just Lorien, stepping onto the Stillwater sidewalk with a duffel over one shoulder and a suitcase in hand. He didn't check his reflection in the glass of the bakery window. He didn't look at his phone. He just stood there for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. Not the past, not the pain, the now. He crossed the street and walked the familiar path back to her home, back to the house with the green shutters. He didn't knock, not right away. He stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at the porch, the same way he had weeks ago, only this time he carried no speeches, no expectations, just presence. Arla opened the door before he reached it. Tessa peeked out from behind her. Neither of them looked surprised. "You came back," Arla said. Lorien nodded. "I didn't come to talk, or convince." He lifted the suitcase slightly. "I just came to stay close, if that's all right." She didn't answer with words, but she stepped aside, and he stepped in. He didn't move into the house. He found a small rental a few blocks away, a one-bedroom with a leaky faucet and a crooked floorboard near the bed. He didn't mind. He woke up to birds outside the window instead of city sirens. He made his own coffee. He walked everywhere. Every morning he passed by the bookstore just to see if she was there. Most days, she was. She didn't always wave. Sometimes she just nodded, but that was enough. Tessa began showing up at his rental with sidewalk chalk and questions. Lots of questions. "Do you like peanut butter? What's your favorite animal? Can you come to the park, or is that a mommy has to say yes thing?" He always answered, carefully, honestly. She started leaving drawings taped to his fridge. The walls began to feel lived in. They made pancakes one Saturday. He burned the first batch. Tessa laughed and dumped sprinkles on the second round. "Now they're colorful and weird," she said. He grinned. "Like us." She nodded. "Exactly." Arla remained cautious. She didn't attend the park visits, didn't stay for pancake mornings, but she saw it. Tessa's brightness, the lightness returning to her daughter's face. She watched from a distance, holding her heart with both hands. One evening she knocked on his door. He opened it quickly, surprised. She held a bag in one hand. Leftovers, nothing fancy. He stepped aside. "Smells better than anything I've managed this week." She smiled, just slightly. They sat across from each other, ate in silence for the first few minutes. Then she said, "She asks about you all the time now." He looked up. "What do you tell her?" "That you're learning how to be here." He nodded slowly. "That's true. I also tell her she doesn't have to rush to trust you." His expression didn't change. "That's true too." They talked for hours that night. No drama, no heavy declarations, just shared memories, missed birthdays, silly details. He told her he still had the notebook she gave him years ago, still blank. She said she figured. He laughed. And she didn't stop him. That night, she didn't stay. But when she left, she didn't close the door all the way. The days began to fold into each other, not in a blur, but in rhythm. Lorian walked Tessa home from school twice a week. They made paper airplanes, built puzzles, and argued about whether cereal was better dry or soggy. He never tried to do too much. He just stayed. Arla noticed. He didn't insert himself, didn't show up at the bookstore unannounced, didn't ask for what hadn't yet been offered. He let her come to him, or not. Either way, he was still there. One evening, as they walked through the park with Tessa skipping ahead, Arla said, "You don't talk about work anymore." He looked over at her. "It's not what I lead with now. Used to be all you talked about. It used to be all I had." She didn't answer right away, but her silence wasn't cold. It was listening. On the weekend, they visited a small fall festival outside of town. Tessa got her face painted like a butterfly. Arla tried apple cider that made her eyes water. Lorian carried her bag when her shoulder got tired. Small things, simple things, but not meaningless. Later that night, Tessa fell asleep in the back seat of Arla's car. Arla drove slowly through the neighborhood, letting the quiet settle. "She asked me if you were going to stay forever," she said. Lorian's eyes didn't move from the window. "What did you tell her?" "That forever is something we earn, not something we say." He nodded. "I'm okay earning it." "I know." They pulled into her driveway. Neither moved. Tessa was still asleep, mouth slightly open, head tilted. Arla looked at Lorian. "She's never called anyone Dad, not even by accident." His voice was calm. "She doesn't have to." Arla turned to face him fully. "But she might want to." He held her gaze. "Then I'll be ready." A few nights later, fireflies lit the yard behind her house. Tessa danced barefoot across the grass, catching them in her hands and letting them go again. Lorian stood beside Arla, watching. "She shines more now," he said. "She's always shined," Arla replied. "You just didn't see it before." He nodded. "That's fair. But you see it now," she added, more gently. "Every day." They stood in silence for a while, shoulder to shoulder. Then Arla turned to him. "Do you know what I hated most?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Tell me that I didn't stop loving you, even when you didn't come back." His chest tightened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She stepped closer, close enough to hear his breath shift, close enough for his hand to find hers. No promises, no guarantees, just two people standing in the glow of a second chance, and under the soft flicker of fireflies she leaned in. Their lips met, slow, certain, real, not like the first time. This time, it was after the storm, after years of pain and silence and growing in different directions. This time, it was with scars, and the strength that comes from choosing love again. Inside the house, Tessa peeked through the curtain and smiled. "Told you they'd kiss," she whispered to herself. And in the yard, two hearts, once torn by distance, began again. Some stories don't end with a moment. They end with a decision. To stay, to forgive, to begin again, even with pieces that no longer fit the way they used to. This wasn't a story about perfection. It was about presence, about how a man once broke something he didn't know how to hold, and then came back not to fix it, but to learn how to carry it with both hands. Because real love isn't neat. It doesn't arrive wrapped in timing or certainty. It's often slow, stubborn, fragile in some places, and unshakable in others. And still, When it's real, it remains, even when it's been quiet for years, even when it's hurt, even when it's almost forgotten. Lorien Thorne didn't return as the man who left. He came back with a suitcase full of silence and hope. He didn't promise Arla the world. He didn't ask her to forget. He simply stayed. And that, more than anything, began to close the distance. Tessa never needed a perfect father. She needed someone who showed up when it mattered. Someone who listened. Someone who didn't interrupt her drawings or pretend to know everything, but instead sat down beside her with curiosity and time. She needed love that wasn't loud, just dependable. And Arla? She didn't need apologies. She needed consistency. Not flowers or speeches, just space to feel safe again. To believe that love could return, not like a spark, but like sunlight after a long winter. Steady, unexpected, welcome. If you've ever made a mistake so big you thought you'd never be forgiven. If you've ever loved someone who hurt you and didn't know how to hold that truth without letting it ruin your softness, this story was for you. Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It isn't saying what you did was okay. It's saying, I no longer want to carry the weight of what you did. It's choosing to set the stone down, not because it wasn't heavy, but because it's time to walk forward. And love? Real love doesn't always arrive on time. It doesn't follow your schedule or respect your plans. It sneaks in, through the voice of a child holding a broken phone, through a memory kept in a box no one was supposed to open, through a moment you thought was too far gone to return to. Lorien once believed that power was what made him valuable. But power didn't make him a father. It didn't teach him how to listen to a 5-year-old who asked simple questions with impossible weight behind them. It didn't hold him when he finally let himself cry in an attic filled with what could have been. Love did that. Real love is never perfect, but it's always worth fighting for, even when it's hard, even when it's late, even when it feels like it might be easier to just walk away again. And as for Arla's letter, the one she wrote but never sent, she was right. If you ever wonder what love looks like, you'll see it in her eyes, not just in Tessa's, but in Arla's, in Lorien's, in every person who's ever decided that healing matters more than ego, that showing up matters more than being right, that choosing someone again, after the storm, carries more strength than walking away ever did. So if this story found you today, if it sat quietly in your chest and reminded you of someone you lost, or someone you're trying to come back to, then maybe it wasn't just a story. Maybe it was a mirror, a reminder that no one is beyond redemption, that love, at its truest, can bend without breaking. And if this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Like it, share it, and most importantly, subscribe, because here on Mr. Ross Story Trail, every story has a soul, and every soul deserves to be seen.